Have you ever looked in the mirror and quietly wondered, when did I stop feeling like myself? Not because of a big crisis, not because something loud or violent happened, but because somewhere along the way, your peace began to slip away, almost silently. You were once grounded, steady, but now there's a strange fog in your thoughts. You hesitate before speaking. You replay conversations at night. You start to apologize for things you never did. And worst of all, a small voice inside starts asking, maybe I am the problem. No one talks about this enough because when we think of harmful people, we often imagine the obvious ones, the ones who yell, insult, or explode. But some of the most dangerous people never raise their voice. They smile, they flatter, they listen so well they make you feel seen until you begin to vanish. These individuals don't need to destroy you loudly. They do it quietly, skillfully. They don't fight your strength, they confuse it. They don't crush your spirit all at once. They starve it, bit by bit, until one day you wake up and wonder where your clarity went. The truth is, you may have already met someone like this, and if you're here, maybe you're still trying to make sense of it all. But let me offer you this. You're not crazy, you're not too sensitive, you're not imagining things. You may be standing in the shadow of someone who's not just difficult, but deeply disordered. Someone who carefully studies others, mimics emotions they don't feel, and thrives on confusion, control, and charm. The Stoics warned us, do not be deceived by appearances. Learn to see clearly. And that's what we're here to do. This isn't just about labeling others. It's about reclaiming yourself, your calm, your clarity, your center. Because once you see the patterns, you stop blaming yourself for the storm someone else created. At True Stoic Way, we believe clarity is strength and peace is a discipline. If this message resonates with you even a little, consider joining us. Subscribe for more tools grounded in Stoic wisdom to help you protect your mind and rebuild your calm, not with anger, but with awareness. Let's begin. It often begins like a scene from a movie. You meet someone who seems to just get you. They look into your eyes like they've known you for years. They laugh at the exact right moments. They finish your sentences. And when you speak, truly speak, about the things that matter, they don't interrupt, don't rush, don't redirect. They listen, attentively, almost reverently. It feels like finally someone sees you. Your quirks don't need explaining. Your wounds don't need hiding. You talk about your love for obscure poetry or your weekend hiking rituals, and they light up like they've been waiting their whole life to meet someone just like you. The connection feels serendipitous, like fate, like you've stumbled upon someone rare in a world full of noise and superficiality. You find yourself thinking, where have they been all my life? And that's exactly what they want you to think. What you're experiencing may not be love. It may not even be connection. It might be mirroring. Strategic, intentional, calculated mirroring. See, some people don't build intimacy the way others do. They don't slowly earn trust over time. They don't reveal who they are, layer by layer. Instead, they study you. They observe what makes you glow, then reflect it back at you like a flawless mirror. They echo your passions, your beliefs, your style of humor. They remember the tiniest detail you mentioned in passing and recycle it a week later in a way that feels beautifully synchronistic. But that synchronicity isn't magic, it's method. Because for someone with a psychopathic mindset, charm isn't a personality trait, it's a tool. Where genuine charm is like a fire, warm, inviting, shared with everyone. The charm of a manipulator is more like a spotlight, focused, intense, and entirely for show. It's not affection, it's camouflage. Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned us long ago, appearances are not reality. He didn't say appearances can be misleading. He said they are not reality, period. In other words, what you feel, what you see, what you think is real must always be examined under the lens of reason, not emotion. This doesn't mean you live in suspicion. It means you stay awake. You learn to recognize when someone is trying to perform intimacy instead of create it. Because the psychopath doesn't come into your life with red flags waving. They arrive with flowers in hand and the perfect anecdote ready. They compliment you, flatter your character, align with your values. They make you feel like the only person in the room. And that's what makes them so dangerous. Their charm isn't authentic. It's adaptive. It's not about connection. It's about control. When you speak about your volunteer work at the animal shelter, they suddenly have a touching story about rescuing a dog in the rain. You mention your obsession with Rumi, and by next week they're quoting his poetry over dinner. You express vulnerability, and they echo it back, but slightly deeper, slightly more raw, slightly more intense. They escalate the connection with speed and precision. They don't give you time to doubt. They create momentum that feels romantic, even spiritual. But that intensity is not love, it's bait. And once you're hooked, once you're emotionally invested, something subtle shifts. They don't adapt as much anymore. Their attention flickers. The dazzling warmth they once showered on you begins to dim, especially when you start expressing your own needs or boundaries. At first, you rationalize. They must be tired, stressed, distracted. But then you notice the pattern. The more independent you become, the less interested they are. The moment you question them, the charm evaporates. And in its place is something colder, sharper, more transactional. That's the thing about people who use charm as a mask. It only lasts as long as it serves them. As soon as they no longer need your admiration or attention, the sweetness turns sour. The carefully constructed character they played for you, gone. And now you're left staring at someone you barely recognize. You begin to question your memory. Were they always like this? Was I imagining the connection? No, you weren't imagining it. You were simply the audience, and they were acting. This is where Stoicism becomes a lifeline, because Stoicism teaches us to judge not by words, but by actions. To measure a person not by how they make us feel, but by how they behave consistently. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, if someone can show me that what I think or do is not right, I will gladly change. For I seek the truth, which has never harmed anyone. But a manipulative person doesn't seek truth. They avoid it. They shape reality to serve their narrative. Their flattery isn't about you. It's about softening your defenses, earning your trust, and gaining access to your emotional world. And once they're inside, they don't build a home. They rearrange the furniture. They hang up a mirror where a window used to be. They fill the space with themselves until you barely see where you end and they begin. So how do you spot the difference between real connection and strategic charm? Start by slowing down. Ask yourself, does this person listen or do they echo? Is their attention steady or only when I praise or please them? Do they show the same warmth to others or only when there's something to gain? Am I changing to stay in their good graces? If you feel like you're constantly adapting, constantly chasing the high of their approval, take a step back. Genuine connection doesn't require performance. It allows space. It allows truth. It allows imperfection. But when someone always says the perfect thing, always appears at the perfect time, always aligns with your every thought and belief, that's not intimacy, that's mimicry. At True Stoic Way, we don't chase fantasy, we practice presence. We choose clarity over comfort, truth over illusion. So if something feels too good to be true, don't shame yourself for hoping. Just learn to pause, observe, ask the harder questions. Because the greatest danger isn't falling for someone's charm, it's staying after the mask has already slipped. Imagine this, you're holding a blue coffee mug in your hand. You know it's blue. You see it, you feel it. You've had it for years. It's the mug you always use on rainy mornings. But someone across from you, calm and confident, looks directly at you and says, "That's not blue, that's red." You laugh, thinking they're joking. But their face doesn't flinch. They lean in and say, "Well, maybe in this light it just looks blue to you. Or maybe you're just remembering it wrong." It happens. And just like that, doubt slips in. Is it the lighting? Did I pick up the wrong mug? You glance down again, still blue. But now the blue feels uncertain. This is how gaslighting begins. Not with screaming or threats, but with quiet, confident distortions of what you know to be true. It's subtle, slippery. And when repeated over time, it doesn't just confuse your thinking, it starts to rewrite your reality. At first, it's just small things. Someone denies saying something they clearly said. They tell you your tone was aggressive, even though you remember being calm. They insist you misunderstood a conversation you know you fully grasped. You push back, gently, but they don't argue. They smile. They reassure. They act like they're helping you remember correctly. And soon you're not defending the facts. You're defending your sanity. Here's the terrifying part. It works, because the human brain craves social harmony. When two people remember something differently, and one of them seems so sure, we tend to second-guess ourselves rather than the other person, especially if that person claims to care about us. Psychopaths use this instinct as a weapon, not by telling wild lies, but by telling small, strategic falsehoods, over and over and over, until you begin to think, maybe I am forgetful, maybe I am too sensitive, maybe I do overreact. That's not insecurity, that's psychological conditioning. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We are not disturbed by things, but by the views we take of things." And when someone is actively manipulating those views, you're no longer reacting to reality. You're reacting to a version of reality they have carefully sculpted for you. Gaslighting isn't just lying. It's rewriting your internal compass. It's turning your own thoughts into an unreliable narrator. It's making you feel like the problem, not because you are, but because they need you to believe that. It often escalates gradually. Let's say you confront them about something hurtful they said. They respond, "I never said that, you must be misremembering." Or worse, "You're always so dramatic. You twist everything I say. You're just insecure." Notice what's happening here. You're no longer talking about what happened. You're now on trial for your reaction to it. And if you press harder, if you bring proof, like screenshots or timestamps, they don't apologize. They shift the conversation. They accuse you of being obsessive, paranoid, controlling. Suddenly you're explaining yourself, defending your tone, apologizing for how you made them feel attacked. All while the original issue, their action, is never addressed. This is no longer just a disagreement. This is psychological warfare. One of the most disturbing tactics psychopaths use is looping. You bring up a concern, they deny, deflect, or distort. You leave the conversation confused, yet weirdly guilty. A few days later, the same issue happens again. You bring it up, same denial, same disorientation. The cycle repeats until you stop confronting them altogether. You stop trusting your instincts. You even stop speaking up, because every conversation feels like walking through a hall of mirrors. They don't need to control your behavior. They've already hijacked your perception. It doesn't stop with you. They triangulate others. They tell your friend you've been acting erratic lately. They tell your coworker you said something cruel behind their back. They drop little seeds of doubt into every space around you. And when conflict arises, they shrug innocently. "Wow, I don't know why everyone's so upset. I've just been trying to help." Now you're isolated, not physically but emotionally, because everyone around you seems to be working off their version of events. And in that silence, in that swirl of confusion, you become dependent on them to explain your world back to you. The most frightening part? You can't prove gaslighting to yourself. That's what makes it so effective. It erodes you quietly. You start journaling obsessively to keep track of what was said. You doubt your emotional reactions. You apologize more than ever before. You begin every sentence with, "Maybe I'm wrong, but..." This isn't overthinking. This is a survival mechanism. Here's how you know you're being gaslighted. You feel confused most of the time. You over-apologize, even for things you didn't do. You start justifying the other person's behavior to your friends. You feel like you're too emotional or overreacting all the time. You dread conversations because you already know they'll somehow become your fault. If this sounds familiar, I want you to know you are not weak. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are being systematically disoriented. Now pause, breathe, and consider this. If you find yourself constantly defending your memory, your motives, your emotions. If you start apologizing for your own perception of reality, you don't need better communication. You need distance. The Stoics teach us that self-trust is not arrogance. It's a form of inner strength, the ability to hold steady when others try to shake your core. They remind us that we are responsible not for what others do, but for how we protect our own minds from corrosion. So if someone in your life is making you doubt your truth and then blaming you for reacting to their lies, that's not love, that's erasure. And the first step back to yourself isn't confrontation, it's recognition. At True Stoic Way, we believe in rebuilding from the inside out, in learning to trust your own clarity again, not by shouting louder, but by standing still, by choosing awareness over explanation, stillness over drama, peace over performance. Because once you recognize gaslighting for what it is, you no longer beg someone to see your truth. You return to it, and you guard it like the sacred thing it is. There's a certain kind of coldness that doesn't come in the form of silence or distance. It comes dressed in empathy, in all the right words, the right nods, the gentle "I understand" when you speak your truth, the perfect pause before the comforting reply, the hand placed just so on your shoulder, and yet, something in you doesn't feel comforted. It feels studied. You try to dismiss it. Maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe I'm too guarded. But the feeling lingers because real empathy doesn't feel choreographed. It doesn't feel like a script. And when you're in the presence of someone who's mastered emotional performance, that's exactly what you're experiencing. Not connection, but character work. Psychopaths, especially the socially refined kind, are often brilliant actors. They know which emotion is expected in any situation. They know what grief looks like, what joy sounds like, what love is supposed to feel like to you. So they replicate it, but not from within, from the outside in. It's like watching someone play a beautiful piano piece from memory, each note flawless, precise, but with dead eyes and a blank heart. The sound is right, but the soul is missing. They don't feel your sadness. They just know how to mimic the right expressions when you cry. They don't rejoice in your victories. They just know when to clap, when to cheer, when to say, "I'm proud of you." They don't feel for you. They respond to you. And that distinction is everything. You open up to them, share a deeply personal wound, and they receive it a little too well. They don't ask curious questions. They don't pause in discomfort or reflect with sincerity. No, they nod, absorb, store it away like data. And later, when conflict arises, that vulnerable moment you shared comes back. Not to bring you closer, but to cut you down. That thing you told them through trembling lips, they'll use like a blade when you least expect it. Maybe this is why no one sticks around for you. You're always this fragile, just like you said you were. It's not impulsive cruelty, it's calculated. Because to a person without empathy, vulnerability isn't sacred, it's leverage. Marcus Aurelius once said, "What injures the hive injures the bee." This was his way of reminding us that we are all connected, that when we harm another, we harm ourselves. But a psychopath does not live by this law. They see no hive, only themselves. They don't feel regret because they don't register the weight of your pain. They don't reflect because they don't feel internally shaken by what they've done. Your tears, your anger, your withdrawal, it all registers, but only as data. They file it under how to control you next time. This is the core of their emptiness. They don't lack intelligence. They don't lack charm. They lack emotional depth. And no matter how convincing they seem in the early days, eventually the mask begins to crack. You start noticing how they talk about others, coldly, cruelly, without compassion. You realize they never really say how they feel, only what they want. You catch them feigning concern in one moment and mocking the same person in private the next. You feel a growing disconnect. How can someone speak so kindly and act so indifferently? Because they're not emotionally attached. They're emotionally fluent. There's a difference. They speak the language of feelings, but they don't live in it. They imitate care. They simulate bonding. But when real life happens, grief, loss, stress, vulnerability, they either disappear or stand there, watching you cry with a strange vacancy in their eyes. You might even start doubting your reactions. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm being dramatic. Maybe they're just not good at expressing themselves. No, you're not asking for too much. You're asking for something real. And they don't have it to give. Seneca wrote, wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for kindness. Kindness isn't complex. It's not theatrical. It's not rehearsed. It's small moments of presence, genuine pauses, unscripted care. It's the warm silence of someone sitting beside you in pain, without trying to fix or analyze or twist it into something useful. But when someone sees kindness as a tool, not a truth, it becomes empty. And once you recognize that hollowness, it becomes impossible to unsee. Because here's what's really happening. They don't see you. They scan you. They don't feel with you. They measure you. You become a character in a story they're writing, useful for emotional supply, for status, for narrative. And when your usefulness fades, so does their interest. No anger, no heartbreak, just a quiet withdrawal, like a curtain closing after a scene. And you're left wondering, was any of it real? The answer is painful. The connection you felt was real. But it wasn't mutual, it was mimicked. They mirrored your emotions, reflected your needs, and amplified your dreams, not to nurture them, but to access them. That's why it felt magical at first, and that's why it now feels hollow. Because you were projecting your emotional depth onto someone who can only echo it back without ever feeling it themselves. So what do you do with this truth? You stop trying to make them feel. You stop trying to awaken empathy where none exists. You stop offering more of your heart, hoping they'll eventually meet you there. Because the kind of person who turns your pain into ammunition will never hold your healing with care. At True Stoic Way, we don't chase connection that's one-sided. We don't plead for empathy from people who treat it like theater. We return to ourselves, to clarity, to discernment, to inner peace. We recognize that emotional depth is not something you should have to earn. It's the minimum for real intimacy. So if something in your gut says this care feels cold, trust it, because real warmth doesn't just sound right, it feels right. And when you stop being analyzed and finally start being seen, you'll know the difference. There comes a moment, quiet but unforgettable, when you realize the person standing in front of you isn't just careless or emotionally immature. They are someone who hurts you and feels nothing about it. No regret, no guilt, not even curiosity about how it made you feel. That's when you stop being confused and start waking up. Because mistakes happen. Even kind people get it wrong. We all stumble. We all say things we shouldn't. We all hurt the ones we love. But when you bring it up, when you say, that hurt me, a good person pauses. They listen, they reflect. A psychopath, they invert. You say, that wasn't okay. They reply, why are you so sensitive? You say, I didn't deserve that. They say, you're always playing the victim. You bring pain, they bring blame. Suddenly the conversation is no longer about what they did. It's about how you reacted. Your hurt becomes a character flaw. Your pain becomes a weapon against you. And you start to question yourself again. Maybe I am overreacting. Maybe I'm the one making things harder. Maybe this is my fault. This isn't an isolated event. It's a cycle. Idealize, exploit, discard. At first, they lift you up. You are everything, beautiful, brilliant, unlike anyone they've ever met. You feel chosen, adored, lucky. Then slowly the energy shifts. They begin to pick at you, small criticisms, subtle jabs, moments of distance. You go from adored to annoying, from perfect to too much, from loved to managed. And in that confusion, you try harder. You explain more. You adjust, appease, accommodate. Because you're trying to get back to the version of them that once made you feel so whole. But here's the truth. That version never existed. It was a mask. And now the mask is off. By the time they discard you, emotionally, physically, or psychologically, you're already too exhausted to ask what happened. And if you do question it, they'll tell you exactly why it didn't work out. You were too demanding. You were impossible to please. You pushed them away. They burn the bridge and hand you the match, and then they walk away, untouched, while you're left standing in the ashes, still wondering if it was your fault the fire started. The Stoics spoke often about the role of conscience. To them, guilt wasn't weakness. It was a signal, an opportunity to realign with virtue. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth which never harmed anyone." But someone who lacks remorse doesn't seek truth. They avoid it. They build their identity on being untouchable, above accountability. In their world, mistakes are never theirs. Consequences are always someone else's burden. And harm is just a strategy. What's most haunting is not just what they do, but how often they do it. It's not one betrayal, it's a pattern of betrayal. It's not one cruel comment. It's a steady drip of devaluation, detachment, and denial. And here's what makes it all worse. They don't just hurt you and walk away. They hurt you and then watch you clean up the mess. They hurt you and then act offended that you're upset. They hurt you and still expect loyalty, softness, forgiveness on demand. It's not just manipulation, it's moral extinction. You might try reasoning with them. You hope that if you just explain clearly enough, if you just word it the right way, if you stay calm enough, they'll finally understand. But they don't, not because they can't, but because they won't. Because understanding would require something they don't have, an emotional compass. And that's something no amount of your compassion can build in someone who refuses to look inward. So what do they do instead? They rationalize. They twist the story until you're the villain and they're the victim. They reframe every outburst as justified, every betrayal as necessary, every cruel word as honesty you needed to hear. And if you start pulling away, if you begin reclaiming your boundaries, they might even accuse you of being cold. You're abandoning them. You've changed. You're heartless now. The irony is cruel. You're the one who stayed through the confusion, through the pain, through the slow erosion of your own peace. And still, somehow, you're the one being blamed for the fallout. So let me say this clearly. If someone keeps hurting you in the same way, over and over, with no true remorse, no change, no effort to grow, that is not a mistake. That is not a phase. That is not a bad day. That is a decision. And decisions define people more than intentions ever will. The Stoics remind us that self-respect is not ego. It's ethics. To choose peace is not weakness. It's wisdom. Because you can't fix someone who feels powerful when you're in pain. You can't reach someone who turns your empathy into ammunition. So ask yourself, do they hurt you and act like it didn't happen? Do they flip the script when you try to speak your truth? Do they make you feel guilty for expecting basic respect? Do they promise change but deliver more chaos? If so, you're not in a relationship. You're in a repetition, and every time you stay, hoping for a different outcome, you're reinforcing their belief that they can cause harm without consequence. At True Stoic Way, we believe in radical clarity, in learning to name patterns instead of excusing them, in honoring your pain, not as proof that you're weak, but that you've been strong for too long. Because healing doesn't begin with blame, it begins with boundaries. And it deepens with the realization that someone who harms without regret was never trying to love you. They were trying to use you. Walk away, not in anger, but in alignment. Because if they can hurt you repeatedly and feel nothing, that's not just cruelty, that's who they are. And you deserve peace that doesn't come with pain. Not all takers look like thieves. Some arrive gently, asking for little things. A small favor here, a ride there, a few dollars until next week. Your time, your energy, your patience, Ruban, just until things settle. At first, you don't even notice it. You offer because you care, because you're kind, because that's what good people do in relationships. But over time, the line between giving and being used begins to blur. They ask you to cover dinner, just this once. Then it's a forgotten Venmo request. Then it's rent. Then it's a temporary stay at your place that becomes permanent. You tell yourself they're just going through a rough patch. You remind yourself that love means support, But slowly their life starts to absorb yours. Their problems become your responsibility. Their debts become your stress. Their schedule dictates your day. And all the while they offer very little in return, if anything at all. They don't say thank you, they say, you know I'd do the same for you. But would they? You begin to wonder. Because every time you ask for space or time or rest, it becomes an issue. Suddenly you're the selfish one. You've changed. You're not as supportive as you used to be. Guilt replaces gratitude. Expectation replaces appreciation. And you begin shrinking, not just your resources, but your needs. You stop asking for help. You stop expressing fatigue. You stop needing anything, just to avoid the guilt they plant in your chest. This is not love, it's extraction. What you thought was partnership has become parasitic. They don't want to build something with you, they want to feed off you. Your success, they take credit. Your time, they claim it. Your empathy, they exploit it. And what's most disturbing is how natural it becomes for them. They act like it's owed, like your labor, your money, your kindness are part of a contract you never signed, but they keep enforcing. Epictetus wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." But to the manipulative mind, wants are endless. They don't seek contentment, they seek control. And they view people, you, not as partners, but as providers of energy, of attention, of shelter. They don't build lives, they extract from them. Psychopaths are especially adept at finding generous, emotionally open people. They scan for the kind-hearted, the stable, the successful, not to admire them, but to use them. And they move quickly, because the longer they're in, the more they can drain. At first, they idealize you. You're amazing. I've never met anyone like you. They praise your stability. They admire your discipline. They marvel at your resilience. But admiration is just the bait, because once they've secured your trust, the requests begin. Tiny, reasonable, harmless, until one day you realize you're carrying them. You cover their expenses because they just need a little help. You cancel plans to tend to their emotional meltdowns. You miss sleep, meals, deadlines, because they're going through something. But what about you? Are they there when you're the one unraveling? Do they pause their chaos when you're the one in pain? Or do they grow impatient, distant, even resentful when the spotlight turns? Because someone who truly loves you doesn't just take, they show up. Not only when it's convenient, not only when it benefits them, but when it matters. A parasitic person, on the other hand, always makes their needs seem more urgent than yours. Their emergencies always outrank your limits. Their stress always overrides your exhaustion. Their deadlines always demand your time, even if yours are crumbling. And if you try to say no, they shift the blame. After all I've done for you, I guess you're not who I thought you were. Wow, I didn't realize helping me was such a burden. Now, not only are you giving more than you can afford, you're apologizing for not giving enough. That's the trap. You begin to lose track of what's yours, your time, your space, your clarity, your self-worth. You feel drained but unsure why. You feel guilty for having needs. You feel responsible for someone else's happiness, safety, survival. And the more you give, the more they expect. Because to them, this isn't generosity, it's entitlement. You weren't chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were strong, and they saw that strength as a resource, something to mine, to hollow out, to consume. The tragedy is, by the time you realize what's happening, you're already depleted. You look in the mirror and barely recognize yourself, not because you are broken, but because you've been quietly eroded. The Stoics taught us to detach from possessions, to live simply, but they never said, let others drain you in the name of love. To give is noble. To be taken from without respect, without balance, without reciprocity is not. There is no virtue in becoming someone's emotional or financial reservoir while they grow fat on your sacrifice. So ask yourself, do I feel obligated to give more than I receive? Do I feel guilty when I set boundaries? Are my resources slowly becoming our resources without consent? Does this person only show love when they want something? Do I feel lighter when they're gone and heavier when they're around? If the answer is yes, you may not be in a relationship. You may be in a harvest, and you're the soil. At True Stoic Way, we believe in generosity, with wisdom, in compassion, with clarity, in kindness, with boundaries. Because love without respect is not love, and neediness without accountability is not intimacy. You are not selfish for saying no. You are not cold for protecting your energy. You are not cruel for wanting your life back. Someone who truly loves you won't keep score, but they won't treat your life like an open tab either. Because a relationship is not a feeding ground. It's a mutual offering of presence, of stability, of shared effort. So when someone shows you over and over that their love only flows in one direction, believe them. They don't want to walk beside you. They want to live inside your life. And the sooner you reclaim your space, the sooner you remember who you are without the weight of someone else's survival strapped to your back. You are not a supply chain. You are not a shelter. You are not a wallet, a therapist, or a savior. You are a person with limits, with value, with the right to peace. There's a strange kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from overwork or sleepless nights. It comes from constantly cleaning up someone else's mess, emotional, financial, social, and being told it's your fault the floor is dirty. At first, it's small things. They forget appointments. They miscommunicate. They lose their temper. You understand, you make excuses. They've been through a lot. They're under pressure. They're not always like this. But as time goes on, the accidents keep happening. And strangely, the cleanup is always yours. They pick the fights, then disappear. They break things, literally or emotionally, and you're the one left holding the broom room. At first, it feels like bad luck. Then, a pattern emerges. They stir up tension between your friends. They provoke drama at family dinners. They quit jobs suddenly. They crash finances with impulsive decisions. And somehow they always walk away clean. You're the one doing the explaining, the apologizing, the repairing, the rebuilding. They don't just create chaos, they engineer it. And you've become the unpaid project manager of their instability. You try to address it. You bring it up calmly. You point to patterns. You ask, do you see how this keeps happening? But instead of accountability, you get spin. They accuse you of micromanaging, of always being negative, of making mountains out of molehills. They flip the script. If you trusted me more, this wouldn't be a problem. You're always looking for something wrong. You're the reason I act this way. Suddenly their chaos isn't chaos. It's a reaction to you. You're not just tired, you're confused. And the confusion is by design. Because to someone with a manipulative mind, chaos isn't a personality trait, it's a strategy. When things are calm, people start seeing clearly. So they stir the pot. Arguments out of nowhere. Crisis at midnight. Plans derailed. Blame deflected. They thrive in disorder because disorder keeps you distracted. Instead of asking, why am I constantly unsettled? You're too busy asking, how do I fix this next disaster? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. The Stoics believed in self-mastery, clarity in thought, consistency in behavior. But the person you're dealing with doesn't aspire to virtue. They aspire to control. And what better tool for control than unpredictability? If you never know whether they'll be loving or cruel, attentive or absent, stable or explosive, you stay on edge. You adapt. You become hyper-vigilant. You try to prevent the next collapse. But collapses still come because they were never accidental. The chaos isn't a storm they can't control. It's a fire they keep lighting. They say things they know will trigger you. They push boundaries they know you've drawn. They ghost you, then reappear like nothing happened. And every time, you're expected to reset, to forgive, to forget, to pretend the damage never happened. And when you don't, you're too dramatic, too unforgiving, too much. You go from being the caretaker to being the villain in their ever-changing narrative. You begin walking on eggshells, so many you forget what solid ground feels like. You question your tone, your timing, your needs. Was I too blunt? Did I say that wrong? Maybe I should have waited for a better moment. And all the while they go on, unbothered, unchanged, unaccountable. Because why should they reflect when you're the one doing all the emotional labor? The most dangerous part of this chaos? It becomes your normal. You start expecting instability. You start bracing for breakdowns. You start measuring peace in short-lived hours, not sustained days. And in that dysfunction, your sense of self erodes. You forget what calm used to feel like. You forget what consistency used to mean. You forget that love shouldn't feel like damage control. Some people will tell you that's just how they are. But don't confuse personality with pattern. There's a difference between being flawed and being harmful, between being disorganized and being deliberately disruptive. Because here's the truth. The person who hurts you and disappears, then comes back only when it suits them, is not chaotic by nature. They're strategic by choice. They destabilize you to keep the power dynamic uneven. So long as you're off balance, they don't have to change. You may tell yourself you're being loyal, but loyalty without boundaries becomes self-betrayal, and love without clarity becomes a prison. You weren't meant to spend your life patching up holes someone else keeps drilling. You weren't meant to lose sleep over someone who never thinks twice before disturbing your peace. You weren't meant to fix what they break, only for them to break it again. So ask yourself, do I feel like I'm constantly managing emotional emergencies that aren't mine? Do I feel anxious when things are too quiet, expecting the next eruption? Do I apologize for reactions caused by their instability? Do I feel more like a buffer than a partner? If yes, then you're not with someone who's struggling to stay stable. You're with someone who uses instability to avoid responsibility. And that, over time, can become the most destructive force of all. At True Stoic Way, we believe in order, not for the sake of perfection, but for the sake of peace. We believe in asking hard questions like, is this chaos really accidental? Or is it engineered to keep me small? Because once you stop trying to decode their dysfunction, you start seeing clearly. They never needed you to fix things. They needed you too distracted to notice what they were breaking. So the next time they leave you cleaning up what they shattered, emotionally, financially, relationally, remember this. It is not your job to carry the weight of someone else's damage. You didn't cause it. You didn't deserve it. You don't owe your peace to someone who profits from your pain. Let the chaos be theirs, not yours. And when they return with silence, excuses, or empty charm, don't step back into the same storm. Step into your clarity. Because if someone's presence brings more confusion than calm, they're not a mystery to solve. They're a pattern to end. There comes a moment, not loud, not cinematic, but quietly revolutionary, when you stop asking, what happened to them, and start asking, what's happening to me? It doesn't happen all at once. It arrives slowly, like dawn after a long, sleepless night. A series of flickers that eventually become a light strong enough to see by. You wake up not with certainty, but with questions. And those questions are the beginning of your return to yourself. Ask yourself, am I constantly apologizing, even when I haven't done anything wrong? Do I feel like I'm always one step behind their emotions, trying to keep things calm? Do I edit myself in conversations, carefully choosing words to avoid setting them off? Have I started doubting my memory, my instincts, my emotional responses? Do I feel drained after interactions, even the good ones? Do I walk away from arguments feeling more confused than before they started? Do I feel like I've lost parts of myself, joy, confidence, lightness, since this relationship began? If the answer is yes to more than one, you're not in a relationship built on love. You're in a system built on control. And now, finally, you've begun to see it. The Stoics never promised us that life would be free of pain. They taught us to see pain for what it is, information. Not something to fear, but something to learn from. And the most painful lesson is this. Some people will use the illusion of love to get what they want, without ever intending to give anything real in return. It's hard to accept, not because you didn't see red flags, but because you did and explained them away, because you believed in growth, because you saw their potential, because you wanted to love generously. And that's what makes it so difficult to walk away. Because somewhere deep down, you still wonder, what if I'm wrong? What if they change? What if it's me? But now something's shifting, because for the first time, you are turning the questions inward, not to blame yourself, but to find the truth beneath the noise. In Stoicism, clarity is not an emotional outburst. It's a slow discipline. It comes not through reaction, but observation. You observe how someone responds to your boundaries. You observe how they behave when they have nothing to gain. You observe how you feel after you've spent time with them. Clarity doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from paying attention. You start to realize love doesn't require you to shrink. Loyalty doesn't mean tolerating abuse. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting patterns. And most of all, your kindness, they should not be a permission slip for someone else's harm. The spiral is seductive because it's familiar, and familiarity is comforting, even when it's painful. But you weren't born into chaos. You adapted to it. You learned to walk on eggshells. You learned to scan for mood shifts. You learned to explain away the inexcusable. But now you're unlearning, and that takes courage. It's terrifying to admit that the person you trusted may never have had the capacity to care in the way you needed. That what you thought was love was often strategy. That the warmth you felt was rehearsed. That the connection you craved was mirrored, not mutual. But once you admit it, something beautiful begins to return. Your self-respect, your boundaries, your stillness, not all at once, but gradually, like breath after drowning. And with that stillness comes vision. You begin to look back on situations that once confused you, and they make perfect sense. You replay conversations and see the manipulation woven into every word. You remember moments of kindness that now feel more like manipulation than care. And it doesn't make you bitter. It makes you clear. Because now you see the difference between love and need, between affection and control, between apology and accountability. The person who caused harm may never admit what they did. They may never take responsibility. They may move on, smiling as if nothing happened. Let them, because the real healing was never about their apology. It was about your awakening. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." And for too long, your thoughts have been shaped by someone else's chaos. But now, you're taking them back. You're no longer trying to convince someone to care. You're no longer waiting for consistency from someone who thrives on contradiction. You're no longer rewriting reality to protect someone else's image. You're rewriting yourself, this time with honesty. And here's one more truth, perhaps the most important of all. Not everyone who acts like they care is capable of care. Some people learn how to imitate emotion. They learn which gestures elicit trust, which words disarm suspicion. But imitation isn't connection. And connection without empathy isn't intimacy. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion of who you hoped they were. And in doing so, you found yourself. Not the version of you they mirrored. Not the version you became to avoid conflict. Not the version they needed you to be to stay in control. But the one who sees clearly now. Who no longer needs permission to trust their instincts. Who no longer accepts crumbs and calls it care. Who no longer apologizes for asking to be treated with decency. This is what awakening looks like. It doesn't always feel good, but it will set you free. And in time, you'll learn. You don't need chaos to feel intensity. You don't need pain to prove loyalty. You don't need dysfunction to feel alive. What you need is already within you. And now that you've seen the truth, you can never unsee it. Let that be your power. Let that be your peace. Let that be the beginning. Not every story ends with resolution. Sometimes it ends with realization. Realization that no matter how much you gave, how much you forgave, how deeply you tried to understand, some people will never meet you where you are. Not because they can't, but because they don't want to. You can't teach empathy to someone who views emotions as inconvenience. You can't build trust with someone who benefits from your confusion. And you cannot heal alongside someone who refuses to see that they're causing harm. You don't need to convince them of anything. You don't need a final conversation, a dramatic exit, or one last moment of closure. You only need clarity. You see, people often ask, how do I fix this? How do I get them to understand what they've done? But here's the truth the Stoics knew well. You cannot change another person's nature. You can only choose your response to it. And sometimes the strongest response is to walk away. Not in bitterness, not in anger, but in full alignment with your peace. Because peace is not something they will offer you. It's something you reclaim for yourself the moment you stop engaging in the performance. Let them say you overreacted. Let them rewrite the story. Let them move on, unfazed, unchanged. That is their path. Yours is different now. Yours is quiet, still, rooted. Yours is the path of someone who chooses not to participate in manipulation, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. Because you finally understand what looks like love isn't always love, and what feels like connection can at times be control wearing a warm disguise. But now that you know, you can choose differently. You don't have to fix the people who broke you. You only have to fix the lie that you deserved it. You didn't. And now you're free to build a life where peace isn't a temporary illusion. It's the foundation beneath everything. You're allowed to protect your mind, to protect your space, to rebuild trust with yourself first. And if you're reading these words with a knot in your chest or a quiet tear running down your cheek, that's not weakness, that's awakening. If you saw yourself in these lines, if any part of this journey felt painfully familiar, you are not alone. Many have walked this road of confusion, exhaustion, and finally, clarity. At True Stoic Way, we explore these lessons not to dwell in pain, but to grow from it, to practice strength without violence, boundaries without guilt, and peace without apology. So if you're ready to protect your mind, your energy, your truth, join us, not for more noise, but for stillness, not for answers, but for clarity. Because peace isn't something we wait for, it's something we choose.